mate? You all right?
Not so bit of a cold, but I'm all right. You know me, I'm always smiling.
Yes. Yeah. Don't know how you manage it. Yeah. You know me, I'm always ready to stab people.
Yeah, I think it's just the different levels of psychosis that we share.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is, yeah. Sorry that you're feeling a little bit under the weather. Did this week's story help you feel better?
Well, when I do the synopsis, I've got two synopses
All right.
for this one. Because this week was a request. Actually, it was Danny, who is a member of the Blackpool Horror Society, requested that we read The Black Cat by Edgar Allan Poe. And I have read The Black Cat by Edgar Allan Poe. I even listened to Christopher Lee reading The Black Cat by Edgar Allan Poe, which I've put a link on our reading list page because I really love listening to him read Poe. It's great. And so I have two synopses for it. Okay, are you ready?
Ready?
See if any of these match up, right? So first one is an unnamed narrator, unreliable narrator, has a favorite cat that follows him around the place and is absolutely wonderful, but he's also a bit of a drinker and he drinks an awful lot. And in a drunken stupor, which could only be described as a psychotic episode, he decides to cut the cat's eye out. So then you have a one-eyed cat, a genuine one-eyed cat walking into a room, not a two-eyed cat leaving a room. And so he then feels dead guilty that he's done this. And then he hates the cat because the cat now looks ugly because he's cut the eye out, and still drinking and still being very psychotic and getting moaned at by his wife for being cruel to the cat. He decides the cat's now responsible for a number of ills, and he hangs the cat cruelly and nastily outside from a tree so that it would stop him thinking about what he had done to the cat. Then with several horrid dreams and images and visions, he then is befriended by a stray cat that looks exactly like his cat Pluto, including only having one eye. Only this one has the hangman's mark on it. And it tortures him and it follows him and it tries to trip him up, and he starts getting really kind of rattled by it and ends up killing his wife in a slightly confusing paragraph, but in a rather nasty way. And then, in order to hide the body in his drunken stupor, he basically does a Fred West on her and bricks her up in the wall of the basement, and then hides the body. And then somehow the police turn up, and they come in and they go on about how wonderfully his house is built, and manage to tear down the wall and find this gruesome, decaying, gore-ridden body behind the wall, which is sending him to the hangman's noose. And interestingly, what I did miss out at the beginning is the whole opening, which is where he actually declares that he's going to die tomorrow. So it's almost confessional in the way it's told. So that's synopsis number one. How's that?
Actually, that was kind of lovely, and it's just given me a couple of thoughts which I'm jotting down. Yeah, but yeah, that seemed succinct and seemed to work. Yeah.
Yeah.
What was synopsis number two?
Some cruel cunt decides to be really, really bad to animals. Gets what he deserves.
That also works as well. Yeah. Right. Before we say anything else, yeah, Danny's not just a member of the Horror Society. She's also a good friend to both of us, and is a poet that we both really, really, really admire. Is that fair?
And short story writer. She's an exceptional talent.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think she's picked this one just as a way of punishing us both, really. I mean, personally, I'm an animal lover. So you sit down to a story and somebody is a little bit tipsy and decides to sort of like gouge the cat's eyeball out. I think that's a touch extreme. I also think that the story is very much a combination of Poe stories. There's echoes of A Cask of Amontillado in there. There's echoes of The Telltale Heart in there with the way it concludes, with the way it starts off, where you've got a narrator saying, I'm not a crazy bastard. but here's my story of how I killed a cat and the cat came back for vengeance.
Yes.
It's almost like in the Telltale Heart, where it starts off with mad. Some people think I'm mad, but I'm not mad. So yeah, it's that whole denying insanity, which is a regular theme with Poe's unreliable narrators. And so, to some extent, whilst I love this story for the cyclical way it has of coming back and biting this narrator deservedly in the arse for the cruelties that he's committed. Shush. Sorry, that. Sorry, I put it on mute. Whilst I love that the whole thing comes back and that the man who hanged the cat ends up being hanged, I think that's nice and clever and works as part of a unity. I do think it's almost as though Edgar Allan Poe is becoming Lee Childs for the way that what he writes is similar to what he's written before. You know, if you read a Lee Childs, what's he called?
Yes, Reacher.
Jack Reacher story.
Yeah.
If you read a Jack Reacher story, it's absolutely brilliant. I love Jack Reacher stories. If you read a second one straight after that first one, in that case, you're there thinking, yeah, they were similar, but there were differences. You read a third one, and they've all just mushed together.
Yeah, it's there's a lot like that actually. I mean, I always used to joke that James Herbert is one of my favorite horror writers.
Yeah,
but I can't read two of his books in a row because they're all the same book when you read two in a row. Individually, if you put other books in between them, they blow your mind because the stories are fantastic. You know, there's a narrative and a plot that goes on that's just really wonderful and twists and turns.
Yeah.
But they always have a male protagonist in it that's only ever referred to by his surname. There's always some child that's really annoyed at some adult somewhere for some nefarious reason. There's always these tropes.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds like I'm having a go at it, but I'm not, because I think that there is a formula to some writers, and that's why we read them, like you say with the Lee Charles. Like, yeah. You know, the what's his name? Lee. Anyway.
Yeah.
It's the Jack Reacher stuff that's why you read a Jack Reacher. You don't pick up a Jack Reacher and go, oh, you know what? I hope in this one he actually goes to college and becomes an antiques expert. Oh no, he's just gone and killed everyone again. You know, because sometimes you go for the familiar. You want to have that kind of familiarity about it, and I think Poe does have that. I think it's one of the reasons he's actually inspirational is because. It's not just one story that's inspirational. It's the fact that you read his body of work and it becomes thematic all the way through. So, yeah, I mean, if you're really, really familiar with his work, it's just like something else. I mean, the language in it and the way that he was playing with the language, particularly when he was on the insane side of things, very similar to Premature Burial in the way that things were said, you know, in the way the language was used. So, I think it's one of those you can tell who it is. If you didn't know it was a Poe story, you'd have a really damn good guess at saying, "Oh, is that Poe?"
Yeah,
you know, it's got his horn. It's like a piece of Poe rock, and it's him written all the way through it, isn't it?
It really is. And yeah, I'm not saying it as a criticism. I love the story, and you can. I was delivering a lecture today about ghost stories and writing about things that we fear, and you can see that he's writing about some things that he fears here.
Yes,
with the insanity there and the harm to cats as well, because he was a huge cat lover. Well, no, he wasn't a huge cat lover. He was a cat love. That makes it sound like he does nasty things with it. I mean,
look, he wasn't Gil, all right. He wasn't like the cat version of Gil. So, you know,
he got a pet cat called Katerina.
Yes.
He looked after and loved it. Just like Lovecraft was a cat lover. So you can see that this is something that he would find so personally offensive and upsetting. And again, the idea that it's happened to somebody because they're out of their mind, either through alcoholic distraction or through mental incapacity. Yeah. And the psychology behind it is absolutely perfect.
Yes.
The way that this guy ends up hating this cat because of what he's done to the cat. And it's so true. This is the way people do react. They don't sort of like think, oh, well, I'm a very bad person, I'm going to become better. They think, well, the cat shouldn't have been there and I fucking hate it now for, every day reminded me of what a twat I was whilst I was pissed up the other night.
I think it's one of those interesting ones, because did I enjoy the story? No, I don't think I did. But I didn't enjoy it for all the right reasons. And I know that sounds really kind of like Rees Mogg making excuses about things. But it's brilliant in achieving what it sets out to achieve. So I didn't find it scary. I found it disgusting. I wasn't creeped out by it. I found it grotesque.
Yeah.
In its everything about it. And I think that's the point. I think that's what the writer was intending to get out of it. He was intending you to feel, appalled by the actions as they went through. So in terms of the story being a success, I've got to say, yes, it was a great success for me in reading it. And I say, hearing Christopher Lee read it adds those extra sort of like layers. But in terms of enjoy, I'm going to say I endured it rather than enjoyed it. I didn't think it was rubbish. So it's not one of those, I hated it or anything like that. And I think all copies should be burned and anyone who likes it should be burned at the stake. None of that type of stuff going on, but I endured it in the same way that I endure Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer as a film. It's an amazing piece of filmmaking. It's an incredible low budget thing, but it's not actually there to be enjoyed. It's not supposed to be enjoyed. You're supposed to feel somewhat dirty after experiencing it. And I think that with this story, I think after you read this story, you should kind of be looking at your own cat or looking at your own dog and just thinking, oh my God, if you got into the wrong hands, you got into the hands of someone like that, who I don't think was doing that just purely through alcoholism. What we now know, I think there's a lot of critics have gone on about it being an alcoholic thing. And as we've discussed before, I think Edgar Allan Poe had a much deeper understanding of mental illness back then than other people did back then.
I think you're absolutely right. One of the things that this does touch on, and it's a subject that we've touched on before, is the death penalty. Not last week, it was the week before when we were looking at the Green Mile.
Yeah.
Which is about the death penalty and how it was applied in 1920s America. The protagonist of this story, hero is probably the wrong word. That is almost certainly the wrong one. The unreliable narrator in this is about to get onto the gallows.
Yes.
And I'm thinking deservedly so. And it's not because of what he's done to his wife. This is just the animal lover in me being stupidly, overly fond of animals. I mean, the Green Mile, a part of me is thinking, well, he wanted to die anyway. And it's probably for the best. But with this one, I'm there thinking, yeah, string the fucker up. He shouldn't be doing that sort of thing to animals.
It is quite interesting the level of violence people are willing to accept. Yeah. I once wrote a joke piece based on reading stuff like this. I remember there was a fire at a dog's home in Manchester, and it was particularly bad. And there was this teenager that had started the fire. It was arson. He, from what I could see, he never set out to actually hurt the dogs, but they did get hurt by his actions. And social media, and this is the bit that sort of like stunned me, was the level of violence people were willing to accept against a child.
Yeah.
He was 14, setting fire to something. But because it killed a load of dogs, they were like, string him to a lamppost and set him on fire so he knows what it feels like. And you're like, as a punishment. Really? You know,
it's a learning experience.
Wow. You know, it's one of those kind of things of, look, I'm pretty certain that kid's going to spend the rest of his life punishing himself, feeling guilty about it, because I don't think he was an animal hater or anything like that. But it really is a strange level that society can go to in their own minds in accepting violence. And in this one, you can't help but go, yeah, wow. The other thing as well is because it's the unreliable narrator that's telling the story. You've got it as 100%, haven't you? You've got the 100% evidence.
Yeah,
that the hanging is just, so that it's easier to actually say that. But I read that, and because of what we know nowadays, this is how far ahead of the game I think Poe was.
Right.
The action of killing animals, the way that he gets annoyed at the animal in order to cut the eye out, and the cruelty whilst being drunk. It's almost like the drink is trying to do self-medication, and that he was actually a complete sociopath, much along the lines of Dexter, because Dexter starts off killing small fluffy animals, and everybody loves Dexter.
He does that off screen.
He didn't. He did it in the very. In fact, I've read the books. Deeply dark.
Oh, in the books, yes, yeah. On screen, Michael C. Hall. All he ever does is pet cats and things, and he's
his younger days. His dad catches him killing small fluffy animals, and that's when he realizes. That's why he gives him the code, because he knows that killing small fluffy animals on a regular basis in a grotesque and unemotional way is one of the precursor signs to someone who is a sociopath and could, given the right circumstances, end up being a serial killer.
Yes.
And I think that's what Poe wrote in The Black Cat. I actually think he wrote someone who was disposed at being a serial killer, that was using alcohol to quench his own bloodthirst and bloodlust, that he then ends up going and mutilating the cat, then killing the cat, and he's just moved on to humans when it's caught.
That's an interesting way of looking at it. Yeah. I mean, I'm still. I watched Breaking Bad a few years ago.
Yeah.
Which was absolutely brilliant. And in one of the episodes, Jesse Pinkman has to go and shoot someone. Walt sort of like says, go and kill that person. And Jesse does as he's told, goes and shoots somebody in the face and kills them. Then goes to an AA meeting or a Narcotics Anonymous meeting to say that he's having difficulties getting over something that he's recently done. And rather than saying he murdered a human, he thinks he's moving it down by saying, oh, I've murdered a dog. And the hatred that's thrown at him for having murdered a dog is so believable. And it's just such a, that if he'd said, oh, I had to murder a human being, he would have had far more empathy shown to him in that meeting.
It's true. It's true. And that's why, going back to this comedy piece that I wrote, when I was writing, I used to do this thing called the popcorn diet. And I had these scientists, and the scientists were working on something, and it went wrong, and the lab exploded. And 3 scientists were killed, but all the lab rats were perfectly fine, so there was no harm done.
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing. I know, because I know the visceral I got when I killed a Bichon Frise in one of my story in Blood Inc., in one of the stories in Blood Inc., and we read it out at the Blackpool Horror Society. And oh my God, I thought I was going to have to. It's a good job it was online. That's all I can say. I think I would have taken some serious damage if I'd read that in front of people.
You would, yeah. Which actually, that reminds me, I've got a writer that I need to throw in your direction, because some of his stuff is very similar to what you produce, and I'm sure you would get a kick out of it. But yeah, I will tell you about that later.
Cool.
So, so animal cruelty. That's what I was going to say. There was a Robin Williams joke where he was saying, and I think it was from Hook, where he said that laboratory workers had started using lawyers instead of rats in the laboratories. because yeah, the scientists didn't get quite as attached to them, and nobody died. Uh,
It's absolutely true, isn't it? I mean, over here in the UK, we would do Tory politicians,
yeah,
and it is that whole kind of thing, and it brings the whole death penalty full circle because I can never, like I say, the one problem with the death penalty, it's easy in books. It's easy to agree with the death penalty in books because you are you have all the facts because that's how you read the story.
yeah.
That's simple as that. But when you talk about the real world, we have no idea. And even when someone is found guilty, you still got to kind of err on. I personally think you do have to err on the idea of a society that has legalized murder effectively. And it's I'm always a bit kind of iffy with that. It's a bit like but everyone loves animals, everyone adores animals, right? So why not take these ones instead of putting them on death row? Why not make them medical experiments? And then you go, but wasn't that exactly what the Nazis were doing in the death camps? And so there's all the moralistic questions around, however amoral these killer rapist, animal cruelty fuckers are. There's always this moralistic question that you got to ask of who watches the Watchmen, and therefore who really has the divine right at the end of the day to say who lives and who dies.
Yeah, which is why I've never really been an advocate of the death penalty. I might make jokes. And I think you're right. Within fiction, the author will make you look at the death penalty in the way that they believe is the right way. So the Stephen King story, we know that he perceives the death penalty as being wrong from the way we read that.
Yes.
This Edgar Allan Poe one, we can see that he sees that death penalty is just in some cases.
Yes.
Because we've got a character who's been brought to justice by his own actions, and yeah, even the spiritual side of things, with the cat having the mark on its chest of gallows, which if it had been a noose, that would have worked better. But gallows, aren't they like the hangman thing that you draw?
Yeah, I just think that basically it could never work out. There was a load of lines underneath it as well that had about 3 letters filled in.
Yeah.
And that was supposed to be the name of the cat, and he couldn't quite get it. Yeah,
it was kind of odd that the cat was called Pluto, and I appreciate that was because it was black. But because we live in a Disney world, I was just thinking of Mickey Mouse going Pluto, Pluto, here Pluto.
Pluto. I was thinking, when was Pluto discovered as a planet?
No,
or not a planet, as it's now been done, to my outrage.
Why to your outrage? Why are you outraged?
Because it's a planet. That's what I learned. And as we know, as you get older, you're not allowed to know new things. You're only allowed to understand what you were told when you were younger. We know this.
Was it included in the Planet Suite?
Pluto?
Yeah.
Don't know.
Pluto was discovered in 1930.
Oh, there you go. So Pluto wasn't discovered as a planet until way after, actually, nearly 100 years after this story.
Oh, yeah. It wasn't in... well, they've tried to add the 8th one in about 2008 in the Planet Suite, but it wasn't really there when...
No, because I mean, it's... there you go. Like this story was 1843.
Right.
Is the Black Cat, 1843. And you say Pluto wasn't discovered and declared a planet originally until 1930.
Yes.
So yeah, nearly 100 years. So you're talking about 87 years or something like that. Before that, so he's obviously using it. It must be a Greek god or something, mustn't it, Pluto?
Yeah, and I think they talk about Plutonian shores. I think he even mentions Plutonian shores in The Raven, to suggest black midnight shores.
Right. So there you go. So and then makes it worse. It then gets downgraded to a dwarf planet.
Are you still worried about this fucking planet?
Yeah, no, well, there were just many levels of humour that I really shouldn't go to on that one.
Yeah, I mean...
Yeah.
I mean, you clearly know far more about astrology than I do, and I use the word astrology deliberately there. Yeah, I mean, I know that there's stuff like Mars bar, Neptune, Venus, and
Yes.
Pluto, and there's the one that we all giggle about.
Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely. Your
Uh,
cock. No, sorry, Uranus.
but those are probably the only ones that I can remember. And
That was nearly all of them.
yeah, that's not bad, is it?
No.
But it's more than I will ever need. Um, when I sort of like put the sat nav on, of where are you going? These are of no use whatsoever. Um,
Yeah, there's always my dad when we always do some. My dad used to do a joke about being a cheapskate and saying that if any of us said that we were short-sighted, he'd drag us outside and go, "What's that in the sky?" He'd go, "The sun." Well, how far do you want to see then?
yeah, yeah, 96 million miles. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I was just with the Pluto thing. But yeah, so he's called the cat's called Pluto because it is black,
Yes.
black cat, and like I say, he's Plutonian shores. And I don't really, I need to look up the word Pluto to be perfectly honest with you. I just knew it was a planet because it's how I was taught. It was the little one on the end, on the far right, on the nice posters that I had of planets when I was a kid. And then someone a few years back then decided it's not big enough to be a planet because apparently it's smaller than our moon, right?
All right.
And they just said, okay, it's a dwarf planet. I was like, oh, fine.
Does that mean the moon's not a planet?
Apparently not. I think planets have to have an orbit of a star, and then moons are satellites that orbit planets.
They're pedantic bastards, aren't they?
Yes.
Rules.
They can't just let us have it. Can't just go, oh look, if we've called it a planet, keep it as a planet.
Yeah. Would it hurt?
No.
No.
No. I don't think there's anybody. I think it hurt more people calling it a dwarf planet, to be perfectly honest with you.
Did it hurt dwarves?
That's my point. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Anyway, we digress.
Just a little bit, yes.
But yeah, so yeah, look, animal cruelty is a great. This is where we start going, almost promoting animal cruelty. Animal cruelty is a really, really, really quick way to make a reader think your protagonist is an absolute bastard.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that works so well in John Wick.
Mm.
When something like you have a puppy getting shot in the first 10 or 15 minutes, in that case, whatever happens after that point, it's justified because the puppy got shot. Yeah.
In Jaws, the dog gets it eaten first. It's that kind of, it goes out, doesn't come back in, and it's the moment. And some kid might get turned into a fountain of blood on a lilo, but it's the moment when the dog doesn't come back that everyone's gone, oh no, like that. So
yeah,
and at that point, the shark is a bastard.
I was watching. I've watched a couple of comedians recently who've been telling stories, and one of them sort of like said, "Yeah, I had a terrible year last year. My wife left me. I lost my house, and my dog died." And everybody went, "Oh!" And he pointed out, "You went oh on the dog dying. The fact that my wife left me, and those things are apparently unimportant. But yeah, yeah,
yes.
But,
so there we go. So there's a writing tip there. I mean, I know Rhys Searsmith, he wrote a short story where he killed a dog, and he actually said he got so much hate mail. And he's there going, it's a story. Save the cat. Yeah.
Save the cat, yeah. Blake Schneider telling you how to write stories and how to...
It's a very good... I'm just like to say this. Save the cat is very, very good as long as you're writing a very specific kind of story.
Yeah.
I think. But it's one of those things that I'll never tell people not to read it, but I'll always say, please don't treat it like a Bible.
Yeah.
It is very much it's a very specific story structure that goes on in Save the Cat.
I think if somebody'd saved the cat in this one, in that case, it would be a very different story indeed.
It would be a bit of a short one, wouldn't it? I mean, it's short enough as it is.
Yeah. But no, I'm delighted that she picked this one. It was a fun one to go through. Fun in sort of like the animal murdery kind of.
Yeah. In the way we all like to go on a wonderful day out on the coach to go and murder some puppies and pick kittens.
Yeah.
Especially, and also it's not just animal cruelty. It's animal cruelty to the one animal that really loves you, because it followed him around everywhere, didn't it? It was not like the other cats that knew.
Yeah.
You know.
And I suppose that's the one thing, and it goes back to this whole thing about how we're obsessed with animals and how we put too much credence and power into looking after animals. Because within that story, he's gotten rid of all his other pets. He's been physically assaulting his wife within this story and doing it in a way that's phrased so eloquently. It almost makes spousal abuse sound like something somebody would want to do. It's sort of like, it's phrased beautifully. It's still horrible, but it's phrased wonderfully. He then goes on to murder his wife.
Yes.
And we're not overlooking that, but it's pretty low on our considerations. And this is partly because the title of the story is The Black Cat, and all the action is centered around this black cat. But it's also because the story gets us to treat humans as being lesser than the cat.
And it's what I was saying, is it makes everything look like a symptom.
Yeah.
It makes it look, it's on the surface of it, and how a lot of the critiques that I've read seem to just brush the surface. They can't get past the animal cruelty. They can't get past the alcohol as well. They almost go, it is alcoholism. This is Poe saying alcohol, bad, okay, right? And it's like, but it's more than that, I think. That's the whole thing, is I actually think Poe was doing more than that in this story. I don't think it was just a purely, the evils of alcohol side of things. I think it was more the worry that people were using alcohol to self-medicate. And I think he had an insight into that in that way. And I think maybe he did himself. I think he understood it, because I think he was barking, absolutely barking at the moon. And he used various substances to self-medicate, but he was self-aware enough to understand that and put it into words rather than actually go out. It's like Roger Waters said when he wrote The Wall. It's the fascist character that comes out of when he gets trapped behind the wall was an exaggeration of how he felt he would turn, and how easy, if somebody gave him a load of power, he would become a fascist. And I think Poe's almost doing that here. He's kind of saying, if he was not so self-aware, he would quite easily go out murdering cats, dogs, and people, because he felt that kind of turmoil within himself.
And interesting you should use the word barking, because I heard somebody refer to Liz Truss earlier today as being Dagenham.
As being Dagenham?
Yeah, Dagenham, because it's 2 stops past barking.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah.
Well, anyway, Danny, thank you so much for letting us read this again. Because I will say, it is something that I had read in the past, but I think I had kind of blocked it out of my memory a little bit because of all the animal shenanigans. But it is a wonderfully written piece that, as any creative writer, and we always say this, the best creative writers read.
Yeah.
And the more you read, and the older you read, I think as well, the better, to find out where it all comes from, find those giants to stand on their shoulders. So, and this is definitely one of them. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I get the impression that he was probably only about 3 foot tall, like Edgar Allan Poe, or maybe a little bit taller than that. But yeah. He was tall enough that if you stood on him, you could get into the top cupboards. Well, that would work, yeah. And as chance of literature go, he's my idol. Yeah, I know you're a massive fan. Yeah, love him to bits. Yeah. Right. Do you want to know what we're doing for our 52nd? 52nd. Next one is going to be the 52nd. And that means one a week for a year. So if you start at number 1, you've got a whole year's worth at one a week of me and him chatting. And actually, I'm not going to call it chatting shit anymore. I do think that these are actually quite good conversations. Yeah, I've been with every one of these. Yeah. Well, we're enjoying them. So anyway, that's what matters. No, we've enjoyed them, and I've noticed, looking at the figures, that there's quite a few people enjoying these. So anybody who's still listening, thank you so much. Yeah, it's much appreciated. And please leave feedback, because we do read it, and
we cry if we don't get feedback.
Absolutely. So for the special show, because everybody does a 50th, everybody does that whole kind of. We're not like that. We like creative. So the 52nd show is our big celebration show. So next one, our 52nd show. What are we going to be reading?
We're going to be reading a story that I've not read before.
Oh,
called "Was It an Illusion?"
Was it an illusion? Who's it by?
It's by Amelia B. Edwards.
Who?
Amelia B. Edwards. Was it an illusion? So we've got female writer. It looks, I think we're looking Victorian era. She looks a little bit Victorian. I mean, it was uploaded February 2019, but I don't think she uploaded it.
It wasn't by her.
Upload wasn't. No, Was It an Illusion? A Parsons Story by Amelia B. Edwards.
Parsons Story. Hang on a second. That might be my woman's book. I have a woman's book, my lord. Can you tell I've been watching Blackadder?
Just a little, yes.
Right.
Yep, do you want me to send you the link to the
Parsons Story? Yeah, please send me the link to the YouTube so I can put it on the list. But when you said a Parsons Story, that suddenly rang a bell.
A Parsons Story.
Yeah, same thing. It's just...
It's not the same thing. You move from the definite article to an indefinite article.
Oh, come on. No, it's not in that one.
I'll send you the link to it.
Yeah, send the link anyway. But a Parsons Story does ring some bells. There Was It an Illusion didn't, but that one did. So, yes. Great, fantastic. Looking forward to that. And you haven't read it either. So,
nope.
Yeah, that's definitely, yes, exciting times. Brilliant.
Right, yes.
So, subscribe, hit the bell, all that kind of shenanigans. And thank you so much, Ash. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you, mate. Loved it. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.